Okay, let's go ahead and solve the proportion. So here is the problem I'm going to be doing in this video. And before we get into this actual problem, I'm going to quickly review what the definition of a proportion is and tell you what is the best strategy, best approach to solve a proportion problem. So we're going to get to this in just 1 second, but first let me go ahead and quickly introduce myself. My name is John. I'm the founder of TabletClass Math. I'm also a middle and high school math teacher, and over many years, I've constructed what I like to believe is one of the best online video based math help programs there is. Of course, I'll let you be the judge of that. You can find a link to my math help program in the description of this video. But in my math help program, you can take a full complete math course or get assistance with the course that you're in. So, complete full lessons, much more than what I do on YouTube. And I actually teach you how to solve the most common problems you face in middle and high school mathematics. I literally solve thousands and thousands of problems. So, very comprehensive program. Now, another thing that I want to just stress real quick before we get going on this problem is the importance of note taking. So, I'm going to make an assumption that most of you watching this video are taking some sort of math class. And if you are, you need to really take a look at your notes. Pay attention to your notes because it's probably the number one indicator to how well you're going to do in terms of your grade, if you will. So, over the decades of teaching math, one thing has been apparent to me is that those students with the best math notes always have the best math grades. And the reverse is true. Those students who have sloppy math notes, inconsistent math notes, maybe no math notes, you kind of get the picture. Often kind of like say, why am I not doing well in math? Well, let me see your math notes. I don't take math notes. Well, you kind of you kind of fill in the blank from there, right? But a good majority of people take okay math notes. You really need to take the best math notes you can. So you want to really want to work on that. But in the meantime, if you need something to study from, I actually offer very detailed, comprehensive math notes. Those would include pre-algebra, algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2, and trigonometry. You can find a link to those in the description of this video as well. Okay, so let's get into this problem. We're going to solve this specific proportion. But let's just ask ourselves, what is a proportion? Okay, what is a proportion? Well, by definition, a proportion is essentially just two equal fractions. So let's say I have the fraction 1/2. Just think of a simple fraction, not 1 over 2, but another fraction that's equivalent to 1/2. Okay, there's a ton of them, right? Let's say 5 over 10. Okay, it could have been 3 over 6, 7 over 14. Doesn't make a difference. Um, these two numbers here, this fraction and this fraction here, are equivalent. Okay, they represent the same mathematical value. Okay, now of course we're using different numbers to represent that value, but they're two equal fractions. Now sometimes proportions are taught related to these topics. Those are ratios and rates. And rates and ratios are themselves fractions or specific type of fractions that have to do with units of measure. We're not going to get into that too much in this video, but just know that when you are told that something is a proportion, what you're being, the idea here is that we have two equal fractions, one fraction equal to another fraction. Now, once something is a proportion or is established to be a proportion, the best way to solve any proportion is to use what we call the cross product. Okay, and that's what we're going to be using in this problem. Now, let's just look at this word cross and product, right? So, what do I mean by that? Well, it happens to be when you have a valid proportion that when you take the products kind of cross diagonal, like so, okay, like this, and we'll see what this means. So in other words, 1 times 10, I'm going on, a product means multiplication, right? 1 times 10 is equal to 2 times 5, okay? This is a representation or an illustration of this concept called the cross product, okay? So 1 times 10 is, of course, 10, and then 2 times 5 is, of course, 10. So the cross products will always be equal, okay, when you have a valid proportion. Sometimes you'll get questions like, is this a proportion? Okay, they'll give you some one fraction equal to another fraction. They'll ask you a question, is it a proportion or not? Well, if you find that the cross products are equal, then you can say, yes, it is a proportion. But if they are not equal, you could say, no, these are not, these two fractions are not equivalent. It is not a proportion. Okay, so let's get into this problem and use the cross product to solve this proportion. Okay, so here is our problem, and we're trying to find the value of x such that it creates this fraction and this fraction being equal to one another. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, I got to know a little bit of algebra here, right? And obviously we got to know what a proportion is, and we got to know something about the cross product. So we're going to multiply across this way. And when we do that, we're going to get x times x plus 1. But here's where a lot of students would get confused. They'll say, okay, x times x plus 1, and that's going to be equal to 2 times 3, okay? Well, the number one thing that can mess you up in this problem is if you don't use grouping symbols. I stress this in a lot of my videos. I don't know if you're new to my YouTube channel, but one of the things I stress in many of my videos is when you have a sum or difference and you're dealing with an algebraic expression is to use parentheses. Now, sometimes they're not going to be written, okay, in the problem. In other words, the problem might be like this, but maybe your teacher, who's creating this little pop quiz or exam question will be like, okay, I'm going to put in the parentheses for you so you don't get this confused. Because here, if you didn't put, let's go back to it the way it is right here. And this is, I know, this is not a small little point that I'm making because this is a very common error that students would make here. So they'll say, okay, I know the cross product is x times x plus 1. They'll write it this way. And then when they do this multiplication, they'll go x times x is x squared plus 1 is equal to 6. Okay, and that's a major mistake. Okay, you have to use the grouping symbols, parentheses here, so it's x times x plus 1 like this. Okay, because now, let's go ahead and continue the problem. Now you can see I have to use the distributive property. So x times x is x squared, x times 1 is x, okay? And then of course here, 2 times 3, that's going to be 6, okay? So this is the cross product, and once we kind of set this up properly, then it's just a bunch of algebra. Now, this algebra, we're going to be solving a quadratic equation. So let's just kind of work through the rest of the process here. So x times x squared, x times 1, x equals 2 times 3, which is 6. So what I want to do here is set this equation equal to 0, okay? And I'm faced with this quadratic trinomial. And what you want to do there is always see if you can factor this, okay? So if you're not sure, about this part of the problem, you want to review quadratic equations and how to solve them, okay? But the main idea with quadratic equations is when you're faced with a trinomial, you always set it equal to 0. See if you can factor it, okay? This polynomial here can be factored as x plus 3 times x minus 2. And then I can set each factor equal to 0. Okay, so x plus 3, that's equal to 0. X minus 2, that's equal to 0. And then I solve for x. I get x equals -3 and x equals 2. Okay, so these two numbers here are the solution to this quadratic equation, but they're also, okay, hopefully, are going to be the values such that when I plug in those values for x here, I'm going to get two equal fractions, okay? So let's go ahead and check that just to make sure we did this right. Okay, so here is our proportion, okay? And we just solved this proportion. We got x equals 2 and x equals -3. So we have two values such that when we plug in for x, these values here, we should end up with two equal fractions. Okay, so let's go ahead and check. Let's start off with x equals 2. We'll plug it in. We'll replace the x, right, into the proportion. Let's see what happens. Okay, so here was x. I'm plugging a 2 there, and here was an x right there, right? So let's just go back and reference our proportion here. Now let's see what happens. Okay, so for 2, I'm going to get 2 plus 1 here in the numerator. So that's 3 over 2. Is that equal to 3 over 2? Yes, it is. 3 over 2 is equal to 3 over 2. That's a true statement. So 2 is a good solution for this proportion. So that checks. All right, now let's check -3. Okay, so we're going to plug in -3 everywhere where x was at. And these are the two spots. where x was located in this original proportion. So let's go ahead and work the numbers here. Negative 3 plus 1 is negative 2, so that's negative 2 over 2. And is that equal to 3 over negative 3? Well, let's just take this a bit closer here. You're saying, well, these aren't two equal fractions, but they're two, the values are equal, okay? They are equal fractions, they just don't look the same, because negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1, and 3 divided by negative 3 is negative 1, so the left equals the right, so that is true. So these solutions check out, and you should always get in the habit, if you have the time, to check your solutions, okay? It's a great thing to do. You're not going to always have the time to plug in and double check your solutions in equations, but you should try to always do that, okay? But the main idea here, again, is proportions come in all kinds of variety of problems, and you're going to need to know some algebra, okay, to be able to solve proportions. It could be basic algebra, or it could be a little bit more advanced algebra, like you're dealing with quadratic equations. But again, all right, to be able to do any proportion problem is, hey, what is a proportion? Okay, what does it mean? And what's the strategy we use to solve proportions? And that would be the cross product. Okay, so hopefully this video helped you out in some way. And if it did, please consider helping me by smashing that like button. And if you're new to my YouTube channel, hopefully you'll consider subscribing if you like my teaching style. I've been on YouTube for a good amount of years now, over 10, and already built up a pretty healthy library of math videos, hundreds and hundreds of math videos. I organize them in different playlists on my channel, so you can get a lot of help there from basic math to more advanced mathematics. But if you're really interested in my most comprehensive, detailed math help, then check out the resources by following the links in the description of this video. But with that being said, I definitely wish you all the best in your mathematics adventures. Thank you for your time, and have a great day.